Hello and welcome to Health City Talks. In this edition, we're going to talk about Zoe Insights, which is a platform that empowers people with the resources, knowledge, and tools they need to mobilize their own personalized health data. We're going to learn a little bit more about crowdsourced health data and digital therapeutics and the impact that these really innovative approaches might have on healthcare here in Alberta and beyond. My name is Mac Mail, and I'm the co-founder of Taproot Publishing. Every Wednesday, we publish the Health Innovation Roundup sponsored by Health City, which is a curated email newsletter that brings together the latest headlines and happenings in Edmonton's vibrant health innovation sector. And my job today is to keep us on time and help shepherd this very interesting conversation along. So let's dive into that. I'd like to first introduce our panelists today. So we have Shanil Pathak, co-founder and CEO of Zoe Insights. Hi, Shanil.
Hi, Matt.
Dr. Anil Khan, a medical geneticist with Magic Clinic.
Hello.
Dan Palfrey, director of the Institute of Health Economics.
Hello.
And of course, Reg Joseph, CEO of Health City. Welcome, everyone. All right, Reg, as the convener of this conversation today, I'm wondering if you can help orient us a little bit. So what has Health City been working on that has led us to this conversation today?
Thank you very much, Mac. You've heard me say this before. Health is going through a huge transformation as we speak. The same level of transportation that we've seen in media, transportation, even banking is happening in health. And more so what we're seeing is the interest of individuals in managing their own health, in taking control over their own health, and being an active participant in the way that their healthcare is being delivered. And so there's some interesting new areas that are developing right now, like crowdsourcing and the opportunity to look at real-world evidence. It's really changing the direction of how medical clinicians and researchers are actually interacting with the patients themselves in a much more collaborative way than has ever happened before. And so those are some of the topics we'd like to get into today to see how health is changing and evolving from that perspective.
Okay, so digital transformation of health continued. That's very interesting. I'd like to start maybe with you then, Dr. Khan. I think a lot of people have probably heard of the term clinical trial, especially this year, as there's lots of talk about COVID-19 vaccines going through clinical trials. And I suspect some people have even heard the term crowdsourcing before, but maybe not in relation to health data. So can you help us understand, what do we mean by crowdsourcing of health data, and how does that relate to clinical trials?
Well, I think for me, one of the things, as Reg mentioned, was taking control of your own data and knowing that data exists, not just coming directly back from your healthcare provider, but other people's experiences with, it could be a particular drug treatment you're on, or it could be a non-drug treatment that you're on, and trying to make sense of that data. There's actually quite a bit of data out there, or I would say quite a bit of information that needs to be curated into data that we can use. So one of the examples, for example, is pain control. And we know we have many issues going on, including issues with the use of different painkillers. But if you think about how you normally deal with pain, somebody might go and see their doctor a few times a year or once a year, and you can't get information on their pain control in that one 30-minute visit. So we need a mechanism where the patients can provide input on their symptoms in a digital format that then gives us real world experience on what their pain control is, whether it's from medications or yoga or something else they've tried. And that type of work can't be done with the traditional studies where you collect static information and you get little snapshots. It's not really continuous data. So I think this is where things are moving into is with digital devices, collecting data from patients where, yes, it may be useful for the practitioner, but it's actually more useful for the patient to see how well they're able to manage their own symptoms and then have some autonomy and control over those symptoms.
That's very interesting. And so the shift from what you might call an encounter-based scenario to one that's more continuous is part of what I'm hearing you talk about. The other thing that strikes me about what you've just described to us is that there's maybe a shift from the doctors and medical professionals holding all of the keys to the castle, so to speak, to empowering individuals and having individuals participate more in both sharing that data and then determining how that data is used. Is that an accurate reflection
Absolutely.
back?
Absolutely. And, you know, I've practiced quite a bit of my career where I hold the keys to the information. If you need an X-ray report, you're not going to get until you see the doctor if you need to look at some outcome or test result. And I think if patients had that information and were able to make decisions on their health, they genuinely want to make decisions that improve their health. And it's a real significant shift in that empowerment to having to be able to make your own decisions. Yes, there will be some decisions, you know, your doctor may need to make. If you're on chemotherapy for something, or if you're taking a special medication, those probably aren't self decisions. But I think a lot of what affects our quality of life, our comfort level, our fitness level, and so on, are actually decisions that people need to be making on their own with the appropriate feedback and data. And I think what we can do with these type of applications is provide them a means and an understanding of how to interpret it and use that data.
I imagine that a lot of this is driven, just as other digital transformation is in other sectors, by the fact that we all have, you know, little supercomputers in our pockets. Many of us wear Fitbits and things like that. You know, is it that continual evolution of technology that is making this shift possible, or are there other things that are happening that you see in healthcare that is making the shift to crowdsourcing your data more likely now to take hold?
Well, there's, like you said, there's a few things that are happening. One is the technology, and wearable technology or technology that you carry with you does make a difference. For example, we're doing a clinical trial on a medication, new medication for mitochondrial disease, where we measure the distance that they walk in 12 minutes. But this phone that I have measures every step I take. It measures when I go to sleep and when I wake up. It actually has a lot of data in there that may be able to say, sorry about that, what the actual my actual movements are. So yes, technology has a place. Also, attitudes are shifting too. I think we are moving into a situation where patients want to have more information. They have access to their medical records in many parts of Alberta right now. They carry medical records portably on them, or they use different applications where they have their health information that they share with the healthcare provider. So we don't have a situation where the health system's source of information is the only system. That's now expanding outside. So those and other things are producing a shift. I think also as time goes by, people are learning to be more autonomous with their information. So in the genetic side, for example, you know, people may be getting ancestry data. Along with that is coming risk factors for certain health information pieces. And they're trying right now in a bit of a haphazard way to try to learn what those things are. But I think we need to give them the information to make really informed decisions about that. So those three things I think are making an impact on how this is progressing.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Dan, I think another thing we need to understand then a little bit better in order to get into Zoe Insights then is this notion of a digital therapeutic. This is another thing it sounds like this ongoing transformation of technology has made possible. Can you explain to us what is a digital therapeutic? What do we mean when we say that?
Well, I think quite simply, we mean something that is intended to support with either patient diagnosis or management. And so it's really, if you think of something like a pharmaceutical, it's intended to treat a disease or even in some cases prevent a disease. And what we're saying here is there are applications that are out there that are supportive of those same objectives. And so Dr. Khan mentioned pain management, for example. So a digital therapeutic like Zoe Insights that gives patients insights into where and when and the context under which they experience pain might lead actually to a reduction in pain, which is an outcome, which could lead to a reduction in use of medications down the road. So I kind of categorize that as something that represents a digital therapeutic that ultimately supports with better patient management of a condition.
So this could be a mobile app, as you say, could be a digital therapeutic. Are there other examples we're seeing so far of what fall into this category?
It can be quite broad. So for example, supporting a diagnosis might be an artificial intelligence engine that looks at images and interprets them on behalf of healthcare professionals and provides a recommendation.
Okay, very interesting. Is this something that is newly enabled? I understand there might have been some sort of new classification from Health Canada and the FDA around digital therapeutics. Is there anything kind of that's changed in the environment recently to enable this? And maybe you can speak a little bit about what's happening here in Alberta more specifically.
Yeah, so Health Canada actually has a discussion paper out for what they're calling medical software as a service. And so the idea here is again, you have software that's providing essentially a medical function supporting diagnosis or treatment. And so that document is intended to support guidance in this space from a regulatory perspective. And so the FDA similarly is going through processes. Organizations like NICE in the UK are working up evaluation frameworks. So categorizing different digital opportunities according to sort of how they operate. Are they really for monitoring, or are they meant to provide a recommendation, for example, to a healthcare professional or to a patient, and really saying what would be the evidence standards that would support us to say they are something that is a Class X medical device, depending on the jurisdiction, and ultimately putting them out there as something that could be, for example, prescribed by a healthcare professional in place of a pill or alongside a pill. So that's, I think, interesting from a regulatory perspective, which is largely focusing on clinical outcomes. The work of the IEG, Institute of Health Economics in Alberta, is really supporting innovators to understand what their full economic value proposition is. And so what I mean by that is, what is the impact on clinical outcomes, but also importantly, what would be the impact on economic outcomes? So healthcare resource utilization, for example, really to quantify really what I call the adoption case for a digital therapeutic, for example. So if we can demonstrate through an economic model, potentially informed by clinical trial data, or better yet, real world evidence data, we're in a position to say this investment on the part of a healthcare system is worth the cost, and ultimately provides a benefit back to the healthcare system and to patients as quantifiable and represents good value for money. So again, if a digital app reduces the need for an expensive medication down the road, that might be modeled out to show that it has actually good value from a healthcare system's perspective and should be considered for adoption. So we're working alongside innovators to really help them to model out current standard of care versus a future standard of care to really quantify that adoption case.
That sounds exciting. I think that's what we would call a win-win, something that improves outcomes for the individual and also has a positive on the healthcare system. One other question about digital therapeutics then, how do we know these things work? So I understand what you're talking about, and potentially they can be prescribed as a potential solution for something a patient is facing, or potentially as a preventative measure. But how do we know that an app can work in the same way that medication might work for pain or something like that, along those lines?
Well, I mean, it's ultimately defining the outcomes of interest. And so what are the clinical outcomes and the quality of life considerations, and what are the relevant costs? And ultimately what health economics typically does is expresses things on a cost per quality adjusted life year basis, which allows us to represent the value of intervention A or digital therapeutic A versus other options on an apples to apples basis. And so I think your question is a good one, is how do we know what success looks like? And I think it's a case by case type of scenario to really say, in this space, what is our intended goal of the therapeutic? How do we measure that? And then how do we put that into a context where we can compare it across other opportunities to spend healthcare resources and really understand if it represents value or not.
Okay. Shanil, I want to turn to you now. Now that we've got a little bit of context about crowdsourcing of data and digital therapeutics, I sense that Zoe Insights is sort of at the intersection of these trends and is really bringing this together. So can you maybe connect those dots for us a little bit and tell us a bit about how Zoe Insights came about?
Sure. Thank you, Matt. So, I mean, I'm here because of the lived experience of my wife and how we used digital therapeutic as well as crowdsourcing to influence her decision making. I'll go through a bit of my personal story. So it was 2012 when my wife was experiencing shoulder pain as well as arm pain, and we went to the doctor. They said most likely it's muscular. Go to the RMT. The pain continued. It got worse, and my suspicion was that it's worse. It's something else. We were dismissed from the doctor, and so we decided to do a private MRI about a year later. it took. And then that's when we found out that she had metastasized lung cancer. And she was 36 at the time, a non-smoker, a runner. So it's very rare for somebody of that age to get lung cancer. But often when a young adult does get lung cancer, it's late stage. So that started our journey. And she was given months to live, but she lived almost 5 years. So she was an outlier. And what we find is that the people with a medical condition that are outliers are crowdsourcing information, but there's a lot of friction to do that. And we developed a community that would coach us and also give us data. And then maybe I'll briefly talk about a real example of how we crowdsource data. So fast forward in year 3, and her therapy was failing. There was progression. We got into a new drug, but there was no data on if it crossed the blood-brain barrier. And the only option we had was whole brain radiation, which is impactful from a quality of life perspective. So we took it on ourselves to go to our community, go to the crowd, find the people who are on the clinical study to donate their data to us. We analyzed it, we parsed it, and we found that the drug did cross the blood-brain barrier. And we took this information with the clinical cases to our oncologist, and he was supportive to delay the whole brain radiation, wait to see how the drug does for a month. And once we did the MRI, we saw a complete response to the brain metastasis. And within 2 months, she was in Bali. Like, we were in Bali within 2 months, and she lived another 18 months with a good quality of life. And so that was part of the genesis of knowing that the data is out there, but there's no real good mechanism to collect the data and influence an individual's decision-making when it comes to treatments, managing side effects and symptoms. And that's the genesis of Zoe Insights.
Thank you for sharing your personal story with us. That's pretty powerful, and it's exciting to hear that you've been able to take something that's very difficult and turn it into a really positive solution that can impact the lives of so many other people. Tell us a bit about that journey, and how did you decide that this could be a company or a business, and then maybe just tell us, clarify for us what Zoe Insights is. Is it an app precisely, and what does it help the patient do?
Sure. Zoe Insights is a SaaS solution, a software as a service. It's a platform, and our mission is to collect real-world data and have one data platform with patient-reported outcomes, and be able to have it shared amongst researchers, clinicians, as well as patients and the caregivers themselves. And so it just presented in different formats. The key thing with Zoe Insights is we want you to have ownership and control of your health and wellness. And we do that by allowing you to have your health data in your pocket. And it's beyond your medical information. And I think that's key. It's your whole health. When people look at their health, they look at holistically. It could be from a fitness, mind, body, mental health, physical health. And that's what our platform allows you to do is collect this information, record it, give you tools to analyze and look at causation, and share it with whomever you want anywhere in the world. And that could be a caregiver, or that could be another practitioner for a second opinion. I think the key thing is people want, when they're going through a health crisis, they want control, they want agency, and they want empowerment. And that's the 3 themes of Zoe Insights.
Okay, so taking that experience that you had and then enabling that for other people. It sounds like you did a lot of those things manually yourself and with your wife, and had to figure that out. And so Zoe Insights is a tool now that other people can use to do that. Can you talk a little bit about the community or the communities that you're trying to serve with Zoe Insights? Is it an app for everyone? Am I going to use this potentially, or are there specific communities or types of patients that you think are best suited to a solution like Zoe Insights?
Well, our big picture is that anybody who has a high value on health and wellness will start using Zoe Insights to start tracking their information. Because sadly, one day, half half of us will either get cancer. I believe 10% of Canadians have a rare disease. And obviously chronic disease is also sadly growing as well, given the situation. And now with COVID, we have mental health.
Right.
So I think sadly at some point you're going to have a health challenge. And one of the key things in order to better improve your outcomes is longitudinal data. And having that data in your hands and be able to share it with whomever you want. And so that's part of our application is you could track all your information and analyze it, and as I said, share it with whomever you want.
So for an individual, that sounds incredibly powerful, and as you said, gives them some agency and empowers them. But it also sounds like you're building a platform that's collecting a large amount of data. And so back to this idea of crowdsourcing, how does what you're doing with Zoe Insights feed into what's happening there, and what potential impacts could come from looking at that data in aggregate?
Yeah, well, we've partnered with a lot of patient organizations and researchers such as Dr. Khan. And let's take the case example of a rare disease. Some of the organizations we partnered with, their patient population in Canada is 50 or 60 or a few hundred. They're all hungry to connect with each other and share their stories, but also share their clinical information to help each other. And so part of that is the community. So with Zoe Insights, we're going to be launching in June ability for people to connect with others who are precisely like them. It could be their gender, their age, their medical condition, as well as even treatments they're on. So they could connect with each other. But then that's a first step. But as we aggregate this data, we could present this data and have researchers such as Dr. Khan analyze it and understand and correlate what people are doing in order to help them beyond the medical system. And then once we could help them get this data, then in essence, you could help others globally. And so we talk about rare disease, and we have a lot of focus on rare disease because one, it's very rare, there's a very small population, so you need a global network, and that's what Zoe Insights could provide. But coming back to my wife's story of lung cancer, I mean, being in your 30s and having lung cancer, it's very few people. But then if you look at the genetic profile of her lung cancer being EGFR positive and these biomarkers, the catchment is even smaller. So what we're doing here with in Alberta and also with the rare disease community can be applied elsewhere to other diseases, because I think the end number is getting smaller and smaller as we get precision medicine. And so people are looking for what we call a precise community and precise patients to connect with. And that's what Zoe Insights offers.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting, that trend toward precision medicine. I hadn't thought about it that way. Dr. Khan, maybe you can speak a little bit to your experience with Zoe Insights, and can you talk a little bit about how you see solutions like that impacting the work that you and other physicians do?
Absolutely. So it's been a great interaction with Zoe Insights and Shanil and his group. And I think when we looked at the platform, we really thought it could transform the way we manage patients. So mostly the diseases I deal with are chronic diseases. As Shanil said, rare diseases make up 10% of the population, which is actually quite significant. And we know very little, there are very few drugs out there that work. Sometimes the drugs will get approved on the market for certain things, but we really don't have any idea of how much it affects the quality of life. And we need to collect that information from patients. Patients might also have experiences that they share that we could learn from. So a lot of times it comes to things like, for example, pain control. People who are in chronic pain have it almost every day. And it may be a mixture of things. It could be pain. For one disease I deal with, Fabry disease, they get sharp pain in their hands and feet. And they're on various different treatments. And I need to learn what treatments are actually working on average in most patients. And there's no company that's doing a trial for things like that.
Right.
There's no company that's looking at the effect of adding relaxation adding yoga to that, and they may have effects in total pain control. There are drugs in the market which some people use for that pain, but they can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and they may not actually be effective. So I think one of the things we're hoping that we can accomplish with collecting data from the application is to use real world evidence that we collect where we don't need huge amounts of patients in that pool. And we actually get to see the combination of things that work. Because if you look at yourself as an individual, there's no one thing you do in the day that really makes a decision of whether something works. You may have more sleep, you may go to yoga class, you may try massage therapy, and you may use a painkiller. And it's that combination that produces the overall effect in an individual, and it may be different in a different individual. This is the only way we see of trying to get ahead of the curve in understanding how quality of life, how symptoms are actually managed in real time. The traditional approach has been rigid clinical trials, which will address one or two questions, but they only address them in that particular setting. They don't address them in the real world setting.
Right.
And when drugs get approved, our system right now says, well, they're approved, and there's an assumption that they're going to work, and they're going to work the way they were intended to work forever and ever. And that's not really true. Sometimes their effects can wane. We may need to switch our approach. So that's now going to come into play, not just for rare diseases. We use rare diseases as a model because we know with certain rare diseases, we can expect certain things like cystic fibrosis or Fabry disease or things like that. But then when we learn those approaches and we do the modeling on those approaches, we know then we can apply them throughout the population for any number of things. So it could be gluten sensitivity, or it could be allergies, it could be any number of those things. What our work is intending to do is to create those models and now expand them to a wide application to improve quality of life. For the diseases I look for, it's actually to improve outcomes, mortality rates, survival, and things like that, which are going to come into play for many diseases.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's it sounds like there's a lot of potential there to really impact individuals positively. Dan, I understand the IHE has been looking at Zoe Insights as well. Maybe you can speak a little bit to the potential economic impact, the stuff you were telling us about earlier, and what kind of positive outcomes you could have in that regard.
Yeah, so we've been working with Zoe Insights to essentially model the current standard of care as is, and then model a new standard of care with Zoe Insights inserted. And ultimately, the goal there is to describe, number one, the headroom available. So what's the clinical gain opportunity? What's the economic savings opportunity? And then number two, to describe sort of what the potential might be under a realistic case study type of scenario in terms of the adoption case that we can quantify for the technology. And then from there, the app will move into sort of routine use in part with the Magic Clinic, and ultimately data will be collected, and we can update the model on the basis of essentially real world evidence, which allows us to reduce the uncertainty of the model and provide interested parties, for example, payers, with information on what the actual value proposition of the application is. And sort of it's an approach we like to take for things like apps where, as we discussed, trials are difficult to do. They're largely infeasible in rare disease populations in a digital context. With technology moving very quickly, it's probably not the best thing to do to have a 5-year randomized control trial kind of period for something that's changing many times throughout the entire process. So really what we're trying to do is support innovators with really quantifying their potential, including their minimum effectiveness, and ultimately proving that out through the course of routine use with the application.
Are you seeing a lot of this in Alberta? Is there like a number of apps and digital solutions like this that could have this kind of impact?
Absolutely, yeah. So Alberta Innovates has a whole program that's focusing on digital from a few different angles and different stages of maturity of the companies. And so we're working with them to support really that economic model that underpins the evaluation of these types of products to really give professionals that provide care, those that pay for care, a solid understanding of what the value proposition is.
Okay, that's pretty exciting. I want to come back to Zoe Insights, of course, but Reg, I wonder if you could just speak for a moment about, what is it about Alberta that makes it that so likely that we've got solutions like this, or is there something about Alberta you think that stands out for the kinds of innovations that we've been hearing about today?
Yeah, a couple of things there, Mac. Absolutely from a talent perspective, Alberta stands out both in terms of its medical education side of things and its basic science research, but then tie that also with our strength around information technology. And so combining those two into the new sort of digital realm in health sort of finds a sweet spot right here in Alberta. And I think that the timing is also right as health systems become more and more under pressure. Some of the traditional approaches we've taken are having incremental successes in the challenges that we're trying to face. And so we need to look at new models and new ways of doing things. And so those are emerging here. So I think there's great opportunities on the technology front. One of the challenges we're going to have is the system front, and Chanel might be able to talk about this a little bit. But the way our health system and the way our clinicians access the system, and then thereby access patients as well through that system, are going to need to change if we're going to be able to make use of these new data sources, new techniques that don't follow the standard paradigm that we have before. And so maybe Chanel, you can speak to a little bit about some of the challenges, and you mentioned earlier friction that you might have had on this front.
Sure, Reg. Some of the challenges, I mean, the step one is collecting your data. And then two is be motivated to track your own health. Collecting your own data is difficult because there's fees involved. I mean, now we are turning the corner with patient portals, but those patient portals, which AHS has, are not complete. It does not give you all your data. And so there's always a struggle to collect this data. And what people do is they walk around with binders. You'll see this, we saw this at Tom Baker. We have paper binders of all your information. And so with Zoe Insights, you could virtualize this. But I think the attitude is shifting that from practitioners as well as the institution is to one, not be paternalistic and move towards self-care and self-control of data. The technology still needs to catch up in terms of integrations and providing this information digitally, but we are moving into the right direction. But there's still the friction. If we look at it in Alberta, there's 2 patient portals, and they don't provide you with your whole health. In Ontario, there's 80, and that just shows the fragmentation of the system. And so at Zoe Insights, we look at is we can't change the incumbent system, but we can empower individuals with a tool to create your own virtual binder and use computer vision to index all the information, make it fully searchable for you, and give you the power to collect your own data. I think that's how we are going to complement the system, but also motivate to disrupt it as well.
I love that. I love the idea of putting the patient at the center and empowering them to be the keeper of all of that information and to be able to continue to augment that. That sounds like a really smart, pragmatic approach. I need to ask you about something else though, Chanel. Alongside all of these other changes that are happening, I feel like there's a greater awareness than ever before about privacy, data privacy, and I'm sure some of the people listening to this have some concerns about that. What are your thoughts on the privacy of the data? If I am replacing a paper binder with Zoe Insights, is that a good thing from a data privacy point of view? Help us understand that a little bit.
Sure. And privacy and security are hot topics and important topics when it comes to health data. But from a technology standpoint, this has been solved. If you look at Canadian Revenue Agency, you could log into their servers and read and write your tax information.
Right.
And do it securely and do it with knowing that it's private. So, and also then obviously you have the financial banking system as well, which is self-evident when it comes to data security. So one of the things with Zoe Insights is, my background is in computer engineering. My co-founder's background is in computer science. We have experience in financial technology, in software as a service. And so we have the foundation to create a platform with security from the start and privacy from design. Every time we design a new functionality, we look at it from that lens. Um, all our data is stored in Canada securely, as in it's encrypted. We, as in Zoe Insights, does not have access to the data. You as the individual has to grant access to people to for that data. And I think the other important thing when it comes to security and privacy is the fact that you have to really look at what is the purpose of the application. We are a social enterprise that's driven from lived experience in order to help people live their best possible life. Our business model is transparent. It's subscription based. You see, a lot of times you could download an application for free, but nothing's for free. If you look at their license agreement, they're taking your personal data and selling it. So instead of you becoming a customer, you're the product. With Zoe Insights, we want you to be our customer, which means we serve you. And having a subscription-based model to our platform keeps us in check of knowing who our customer is. And then also, it gives us the credibility that this is not about selling data. It's actually about providing you with a service to help you in your health. And in fair exchange, it's $5 a month for the premium service. But for others, you can use the free service as well.
Okay, that's great. I think that'll be reassuring for people for sure to hear your perspective on that. So thank you. We're about going to wrap up here, but I just wanted to give you, Chanel, an opportunity to help us envision where this is going. Like, what is the opportunity for Zoe Insights? Where do you think this could have an impact for individuals, for communities, for the economy, and the impact on health? Where is it all going? Just paint that picture.
Well, I think I'll go back to, I was at an InfoWay conference presenting in 2017, and a gentleman came to me and he said, Shneel, you have the vision, but you're 5 years too early. And what's happened since then, especially it's been accelerated with COVID, is there's a movement for self-care. There's a movement to control one's data. People are becoming more data aware. But let's put that aside. What Zoe Insights wants to do is inspire the citizen scientists in everyone around the world. And the building blocks of you becoming a citizen scientist is collecting your own data, having the tools to analyze it, but also understanding how you're doing compared to others who are like-minded and going through the same experience. And that's the crowdsourcing platform which we want to build. And we want to build this as being global, where we help millions of people, and we were able to take that data, that intelligence in near real time, apply artificial intelligence to it to get it to a point where it provides you with clinically relevant and actionable data such that you could help yourself day to day to live, to improve your health conditions and live your best possible life. But it all starts with the ability to collect your data and form a community. And that's where we are today.
That's great. I mean, how refreshing to feel empowered to be able to look after my data as a patient and be able to take that and apply it and have an impact. I think that's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt and Mac. And also, I mean, our website, zoeinsights.com, and you can see more information on how we're making an impact to the communities that we serve.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Shanil, Dr. Khan, and Dan, and Reg. Thank you all for sharing your perspective and your experience about this with us. I think it's pretty exciting to hear what's happening with digital therapeutics in Alberta and beyond, and of course about Zoe Insights and where all of this could go. So I appreciate your time and sharing all of that with us. Thank you to everyone who's been listening and watching to this episode. You can check out, as Shanil said, zoeinsights.com for more information on the company and the things that they're building. And I also encourage you to check out healthcities.ca for previous and future episodes of Health City Talks, as well as all of the other exciting work that Health City is doing. So thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.